first stars with a global name. But now the media business, especially television, is becoming increasingly multinational. This trend is accelerated by the efforts to privatize and deregulate this activity worldwide. Both of these developments are driven partly by technological change. For example, digital compression allows between 8 and 12 channels to occupy the same capacity required by a single analog channel. Broadcasting has thus changed from a medium in scarce supply to one with plentiful capacity, thus forcing governments to give up total ownership and control. Culture is local, but the American culture that U.S. television has packaged seems to have a certain universal appeal which may have something to do with America's melting pot of different cultures or its being a country of countries, and with English becoming the primary global tongue. But I must insist that our increasingly cultural commonalities as a global community should not deter us in our pursuit of uniqueness, diversity, and individuality. This is the real strength of our world in terms of business, education, and welfare for all. In future video conferences, we will be discussing the effect of demographics and Generation X in marketing and the media, using benchmarking to gather competitive intelligence, working with multiple cultures using commercial diplomacy, and a variety of other topics that will assist you in developing your organization in this increasingly complex future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudron. Let us continue with the second question and answer session. Our first call is from Mexico, from Grupo Sedva, in Tlalnepantla, in the Estado de México.
Please, ¿aló? Adelante. Adelante. According to marketing, what solutions does the strategic planning give the educational institutions that want to open up and go abroad, and what would be our expected success? What could we expect? And from
I think in part that success is really going to revolving around how much marketing research you can do to find out really two things. One thing, what is your university's core competency? What are you really very good at compared to your potential competitors? The second part really has to do with finding out who your potential customers might be in that. It may be most of your customers may be local or regional in nature, and so that's what you need to focus on. In regards to your possibility of success, that is quite problematic, to be honest with you, and I'm not sure I can really give you a percentage of what might work or what might not work.
Our next question is from Peru, la Universidad Nacional de Ingeniería en Lima.
University of Engineering in Lima. Adelante, por favor, la pregunta. Adelante. My question is on behalf of the Association of Exporters in Peru, in Lima, Peru, and the National University of Engineering. To what extent do you think that we're applying on the planet, or regions or countries of this world, the sense of globalization? To what extent are we really applying in the different parts of the world this globalization concept? How rooted is the globalization, or how much are people aware, do you think, in the world of this globalization phenomenon?
I don't think they're very aware at all. I think that outside some pockets of universities and multinational corporations, I think this is simply not on most people's perception or on their radar screen at all. I don't know, Stan, you may have some...
Well, I think this is one of the things that we're going to see come to the forefront in the new century that is upon us. I agree that unfortunately the concept, although it has been with us for many, many generations, is not being fully embraced. But it not only will be, I think it has to be. And it's just will take education and it'll be an evolutionary thing, but definitely on the upswing.
The next question is from Mexico, El Colegio de Bachilleres de Tabasco, en Villahermosa, en el estado de Tabasco. The next question will be from Brazil, in English, from the Serviço Nacional de Aprendizagem Comercial Porto Alegre en Rio Grande do Sul, in Brazil.
Mr. Chaudron, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How do you see Brazil nowadays as part of a globalized world in terms of technology, market, and economic development? And what about the future of Brazil?
So far as what I can see now, I think that the future of Brazil is untapped. I think that Brazil, up until relatively recently, is more been a resource-driven country in terms of hardwoods, mineral resources, and the like, from where it achieves most of what it does. The next transition is really going to be using its skilled labor force in more diverse ways to make sure that it really gets the higher value added opportunities that are out there, not just being the manufacturing arm of a Volkswagen or the place where we can be buying hardwoods. In what regions or opportunities that might be, I'm not sure. That's subject for a much greater discussion.
Our next question is also from Mexico, from Mabe Componentes in Querétaro, Querétaro.
The company designs and develops a strategy, a marketing strategy and an advertising strategy, specifically with a new concept. In this case, when the intention is to promote and market something on an international level, what possibilities are there of promoting this model?
I think that there are a couple of different opportunities. I think that for one, that the opportunity, as what Stan has mentioned about the internet, is a wonderful opportunity to get exposure to a wide variety of people for your product. I think the second opportunity really is in terms of making alliances or co-opting with organizations in your target countries, in your target regions. They have the expertise in terms of legal issues, in terms of cultural issues that, at least initially, you don't have. And I think by a combination of the internet, promoting it that way on your own, as well as co-opting with local and regional partners in your target markets, I think will be of most benefit to you.
Our next question should be in English from the Panama Canal Commission in Panama, Panama.
Good morning again. How can you implement globalization theory, which sometimes means change of working conditions with unions in U.S. government agencies?
That is a difficult question to answer. What it really boils down to is the idea that one has to get everyone's cooperation to get this effort made. If they do not see what is in it for them, to be frank, I don't see any particular way in why they should cooperate. So one has to structure the relationship, structure the programs between them so that the unions get something out of it, governments get something out of it, and the organizations themselves get something out of it. Otherwise, it becomes an exercise in futility because all one can do is words, and people don't get much from words a lot of times. Money speaks louder.
Next, we have a call from Mexico, la Universidad Autónoma del Estado de México, en Toluca, en el Estado de México.
Within the global thought context, from a local unit, when you think about the retail in Latin American cities now is a very important sector, but they have very little technology available, or maybe none. What possibilities do they have to integrate, and what kind of strategies could they implement when they have very little resources or technologies in place or available to them?
Well, if I may, my answer to that is avail yourself of the information that is available to you. If you do not have sufficient information, obtain it. And of course, that's oversimplification, but it is available. Information is available domestically, and it is available from outside of your particular region. The danger of accumulating an immense amount of data is, and that's where I referred to paralysis by analysis, is to do nothing with it. So after you do a tremendous amount of analysis, thinking and questioning, you must use it. Use your market research, as we've mentioned prior to this. I don't accept as an excuse that you do not have sufficient information. It is there, and it is up to you to go out and reach out and obtain it.
I think also that you have another issue in that regardless, it goes back to what Stan is saying, that regardless of how much information that you have, there is still a risk. And there is going to be at some point along your decision-making process that you just have to use an American expression, go for it, take the risk, make the decision, and do something. And that you very well may fail, but that's okay, as long as you learn from it and do better the next time.
Now we have a question from Mexico, from the Instituto Tecnológico de Ocotlán, in Ocotlán, Jalisco.
Buenos días. How can you motivate the entrepreneurs of small and medium-sized industries for them to adapt to and use this very powerful strategic planning, which is a very powerful tool?
Well, you have to find a way to open their eyes. They have to see their own company and their competitors in an impartial and objective manner. Many companies are traditionally adapted to doing things today the way they did yesterday, and they have to look outside and take off their rose-colored glasses and look at the world and the region that they're asked to participate in.
I think also that in terms of what Shell did in terms of its scenario planning, which I briefly mentioned in the pre-tape, is also a useful feature. They helped its own management look at its assumptions as far as what they thought the future would look like. And it turned out they thought the future would be just like the past, and they had some rather poor assumptions that went into that particular belief. What they did when they examined those assumptions, they said, oh, the future may not be like the past, And as a result of that, we may have to undergo some rather tremendous changes to make it accomplish. If they don't see the need, small business owners, or anyone else for that matter, aren't going to do something. So it's a matter of persuading them and helping them see the current business and future business case for making change. Then they'll logically follow because they can be making money that way.
We are hearing again from Tabasco, Mexico, from El Colegio de Bachilleres de Tabasco en Villahermosa.
Following. Mexico culturally has the majority of Mexican inhabitants have no idea about marketing or globalization or strategic planning because technology is not available but only to a very small elite. And how can we have the majority of people have this available to them? Muy bien, gracias.
That goes back to Stan's political kind of question. Part of what a country has to focus on is the education of its citizens. If that is not an imperative for its government, then there is hardly any opportunity at all for the majority of citizens to become aware of this kind of thing. It's a matter of putting pressure on political officials to make sure that kind of thing is done.
Thank you. The next question is from Yucatán, México, el Instituto Tecnológico de Mérida, en Mérida, Yucatán.
I'm calling from Colegio de Bachilleres Tabasco. This is Tabasco calling. Adelante, Tabasco, adelante. Aló, adelante. From Plantel 2, adelante. La pregunta, adelante. Tabasco. We have two questions. In Mexico, we have about 40 million poor. Do you think we could really integrate to globalization without losing any more than we already have? Would this globalization be beneficial to all of them? That's one question. Then the other one, what about the paradigm? If we could this be... aló, por favor, ¿podría repetir su pregunta, esta segunda pregunta? Second question is, adelante. As a paradigm. Aló, adelante, siga su pregunta, por favor, estoy oyendo. A perspective as a paradigm applied to strategic planning could be perhaps, do you think, an option for the future?
Well, allow me to answer
Permítame.
the first question, the first part of the question. And you allude to the fact that Mexico has 40 million poor. That's an asset, not a detriment from this standpoint. You have a tremendous workforce, and the idea, the design, the concept would be to find ways to put them to work effectively. We have a situation on our border in Tijuana where the unemployment rate is only 1% of the population because of the tremendous amount of industry that has come there as a result of the maquiladora industry. So utilize one of your greatest assets that you have in Mexico, and that is your workforce. As to the second question...
Well, I think that whether you like it or not, whenever you undergo any kind of change, there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers. And the point what you have to try to do is to minimize your losses. But to some extent, the poor will be hurt by this, at least in the short run. And I don't think there's any other way around it. In the long run, if ultimately everyone doesn't benefit, any kind of technological change will be a losing imperative, that's for sure.
Now from Mexico City, from la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, la Facultad de Medicina Veterinaria y Zootecnica.
Is, could we consider that the competition would be a source of an international conflict for in next century? Would this global competitiveness, would you think this could be a source of conflict in the next century?
Oh, for certain is that any kind of economic conflict potentially could turn into an armed conflict in the worst circumstance. I don't necessarily see immediately where that would happen, but to give a very brief example, that the resurgence of China and its economic issues really has started to change the defensive posture of the United States, in that increasing alliances with the various surrounding countries is a way of counterbalancing China's economic thing. There was just a recent change where United States ships can now stop in Singapore. And now we'll have a very large defensive base there as part of the counterweight to China. I don't think it's in the cards in the short term. Long term, I'm not sure.
Next, from Coahuila, Mexico, from la Universidad Tecnológica de Coahuila en Ramos Arizpe.
Good morning. I am greetings to both of you, to all of you. What are the basic steps for you to establish a vision and a mission of an organization in today's times where we have now this new environment, this global environment?
I think this is it right here.
Yes. I would say define your target audience. And your target audience is just not one group. It means suppliers, intermediaries, governments, local community, bankers, creditors, media organizations, and of course not to ever be overlooked, your shareholders. So you define your target audience and understand how business in a free market works, and that's extremely important to understand. And what we haven't really mentioned in this part of the discussion is develop a marketing plan. Plan your work your plan.
Next, from Hidalgo, Mexico, la Universidad La Salle, Pachuca, Hidalgo, en Mexico.
Our question is, how does globalization affect the mining companies, particularly Mexican mining companies?
Well, one of my clients is a U.S. mining company, so I can perhaps address that to some extent. Globalization, to give one example on what happened several years ago, there was the Sumitomo copper scandal, in which a variety of illegal activities went on, as a result of which copper prices substantially declined for about 6 months to a year. One realizes that it's simply not producing a particular raw material for the local market anymore. You have to take a look at the long-term scenario in terms of long-term demand. You also need to take a look at in terms of what long-term supply is coming into play. Just given as an example for copper, is that there, at least for a while, was an increasing demand for copper. But unfortunately, what is also coming to be on is a huge amount of supply coming on down the line the next 5 to 10 years. And so there's going to be an open question on whether that supply-demand curve is really going to be to the benefit of the mining companies themselves. So you have to take into account all those variables in deciding on how much of an emphasis in mining activities that you really have to be placing in the next few years.
For our last question, we're going once again to our colleagues in Yucatán, Mexico, at the Instituto Tecnológico de Mérida, en Mérida, Yucatán.
Specifically, what do you think Mexico ought to implement in order to be successful in an international market?
Stan, that sounds like a good one.
I didn't quite hear that question. Would you repeat that?
What can Mexico do to become competitive in the globalized market?
Mexico is now taking steps in that direction. to be competitive in a global market. Mexico has to understand what I mentioned before, to utilize their great workforce. Their labor factor right now makes them in a very enviable position. I represent a company here in the United States that was doing certain types of assembly of their product in the United States and has shifted that assembly to Mexico to take advantage of the lower labor cost there. And Mexico has to recognize what they have that places them in an enviable position. And again, I mentioned Mexico's great natural resources. Take advantage of them to a point where they can be made available throughout the world. And Mexico will therefore become even stronger in the global marketplace.
And what I would add to that is, in the longer term, Mexico is going to have to eventually look beyond being just the cheap labor resource. They're going to have to decide both nationally and locally that what kind of competencies do they want to be able to develop in themselves so that there are not just minimum wage jobs around, but more higher value added jobs in that. That certainly is a long-term program, 30 to 50 years out. But that's the kind of perspective that what I think Mexico and any developed nation has to create. How do we move beyond the commodity-based, cheap labor-based kind of resource we ultimately have to get out of?
Thank you for your questions. They were excellent, but we have run out of time. Thank you, Mr. Schultz, Dr. Chaudron. We hope that you have enjoyed participating in this video conference. We will continue transmitting programs on the latest in global competitiveness. We invite you to participate on March 5, 1998, in the second program of our 1998 series entitled Standardization and Metrology. For additional information on the International Training Center's programs, please consult your participants' manual where you will find the dates and specific topics for each program. Also, if you are interested in participating in training programs which will be offered by the International Training Center, please contact the Center by letter, phone, fax, or email. On behalf of all of us who collaborate with the International Training Center, I thank you for your participation and interest in today's program. Thank you, and see you soon.